Um, so within the class, the best parts for me were coming every week and talking openly about it. The group held each other's stories in secret, and knowing that you could trust everyone there. You could just share without wondering what people were thinking, or if they were judging you, or if they were going to minimize your experience. One of the takeaways that I had during the class, for me, I just liked putting a name on what I was feeling, and then also learning about how others were dealing with my grief, or how others weren't dealing with my grief. One of my favorite sections in the book is definitely the myths of grief, because I used to say some of them myself, and I'm a pretty learned person in the area of emotional intelligence, and so I would find myself saying things like, well, time heals all wounds, and I'll never say that again, because time doesn't heal wounds. They fester and get dirty and infected and messy, and if you don't do something about it. So for me, the grief recovery program was like the ointment, the Neosporin, I guess, in my wound. And I would get pretty excited to come. I'm not sure why I got excited about coming to hang out with a bunch of other grievers, but birds of a feather flock together, and sometimes if you're sad, it's nice to be with other people who are sad, and if you achieve and start to really benefit from the program, it's nice to have people that support you there too, and who get it. A lot of my friends I lost a great majority of the relationships that I had before my daughter's diagnosis, because people don't know what to say and they don't know what to do, but I can't help that. I needed to take care of my kids and my family and my spouse, and I tell people, if you don't know what to say, this is what you can say, and this is what you can do. I try and educate people in my own life, and then in other people. When I hear them using the grief myths in their own life, I'll correct strangers. It gets kind of ridiculous sometimes. But the other part of the class I liked was the letter. There were several things that I was saying prior to the grief recovery program that I call my dark, yucky places, the things that I would say that would take me to horrible places of grief, like, this wasn't supposed to happen to us. That was one of my big ones. Just saying that phrase would take me back, way back to the day she was diagnosed. And today I know it doesn't matter. Lots of things aren't supposed to happen to you, and sometimes bad things do, and that's just it. And identifying it and feeling it, and then moving on with it. Not, moving on from it, but accepting it and carrying it along with me, that yes, this wasn't, but it is, and I'm going to do the best I can with what I was given. But I love the letter. I did write it to my daughter, who is still living. A lot of people, wrote it to their deceased spouses, and so they can have their letter lying around the house. But I made the choice in my letter. I forgave her for being who she is, and I was apologetic to her for being who she is, because at times I'm not comfortable with it, because it's a challenge. But with my letter, I took it home and I read it aloud, and I actually burned it, and that was the choice that I made for myself. I didn't want to deal with my children ever finding it and them knowing that I had those things to feel or to say, because it could be damaging for them to know that I had once felt that way. But since my grief is with a child who is living with me and who is near and dear to me, I am constantly faced with it. I was joking just the other day that they need to have a program for the chronic griever, the new grief that comes up. So I'll tell people, I mastered the long-term grief. This wasn't supposed to happen. What am I supposed to do now? Life didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. I've mastered that, and I don't use those words, and I've coped with that, and I've accepted this is it for us. But the daily grief, the new grief that comes up every day, when I take my 4-year-old daughter to the park, and there's 4-year-olds running around, taking care of themselves, and using spoons, and swinging on swings, and dressing themselves, and they might not be dressing themselves at the park, but when they're doing the things that my daughter can't do and may not do, a whole new ball of grief, a whole new rock in my backpack gets thrown in. But because of the tools that I learned in the program, I'm able to take each new element of grief that rises up and attack it in the same way that I did my original grief. So if people ask me, what is grief recovery, I tell my friends, you need to go. I am a pusher for grief recovery program for sure. And they'll say, well, what is it and why should I go? And my answer to them every time is because it saved my life. There's no doubt about it. It might not have saved my physical life, but it saved my emotional life. And without that, what good is living at all? Especially when you're living for your kids. So, that's my story.